morning. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome everybody. This is probably going to be one of our best sessions in the whole of VivaTech, but I am very biased. This is where bias is a good thing, right? Welcome everyone to our session, A Man's World. There is a question mark after Man's World, very deliberately. How do we advance more women in technology? To set the tone, we're going to have a fast-paced discussion this morning. We have got some great guests who are going to talk to us about women in tech roles, the barriers that we have seen, the barriers we still have, the solutions that we can leverage to address to see more women in technology, more women in leadership, and more women in the workforce. What a great discussion. Thank you and welcome. Let me introduce our panel and let me get this right, because these are mini bios, because we are so proud of these guests. Welcome, in case you do not know, Muriel Pénicaud. Welcome, Muriel. Thank you so much. Former Minister of Labour here in France, a Manpower Group from our Board of Directors, Senior Advisor at Bain Capital, Deputy CEO of Dassault Systems, a world leader company in technology. Thank you, Muriel. Sophia, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. Sophia is Head of Group Human Resources and a member of the Executive Committee at BNP Paribas. And welcome to our own Thomas. You may have seen him already this morning. If you haven't, you'll see a lot of him. Thomas is our Chief Innovation Officer at Manpower Group and author of a number of books, a couple that are particularly relevant to this morning's discussion, and one of which might be available for a bit of a giveaway through the course of today. We'll cover both of them, don't worry, and they're on Amazon. He'll thank me later for that. So without further ado, A Man's World, How to Advance Women in Technology. Let's start by setting the scene, take a glimpse around this room. Incredibly, there's probably a pretty good balance of gender here in this session this morning. That might not necessarily, maybe Thomas is feeling a little underrepresented, I don't know. That's deliberate too. But today, less than 1 in 4 roles in technology in Europe are done by women. So what are we going to do about that? How are we going to address it? The long-term demand for tech talent is just on the steepest of trajectories, so we need to begin to truly address in this sector. I'm going to start with Muriel first. Muriel, so pleased to have you. Thank you. So much of the work that you've done on labour reform that you've led has had such an positive impact on women in the labour market particularly. You created the Gender Equality Index and so much more to really to begin to address equality. Talk to us a little bit as well around the challenges. We'll start with the challenges and then we'll get a little more positive, right? On the challenges for achieving equality for women in technology particularly.
Thank you. I think the first thing to acknowledge is only 8% of girls today envision to go to the tech jobs. And knowing that 2/3 of the new jobs are related, more or less, to technology. So it's a big, big, big issue. It's not like a small issue because they should be everywhere. It's just critical for their future. And for me, there are 3 obstacles we need to overcome. The first one is a question of image and then desire. And the parents and the teachers have a huge responsibility. In all countries, we can see that when the girls are speaking of going to tech, they say, well, are you sure it's tough, long working hours? Are you sure you want that? When it's boys, they say, go. So the first thing is to make all the girls aware of the diversity of jobs, of the excitement of the jobs. And in the continuous education too, just a very small story. Maybe you know Simplon. Simplon is a universal school for digitalization, and they take dropout, unemployed people, anyone. I met a baker woman. She was a baker. She got an allergy to the wheat. Now she's a data scientist at Safran because somebody believed in her. She thought she was bad in math, but she was very logic. And she could do the way. But there were someone on the way, and the parents and teacher need to do that. The second thing is clearly the way of working. There is a mythology about work alcoholism that if you work hard doesn't mean work 24 hours. You can work hard very efficiently without having all the night jobs. And that's a big reason why women don't go to tech because I think it's impossible. The third one, it will be for Sophia, it's the access to capital. Only 1 out of 4 head of startups are women. But when they go to banks, maybe not BNP Paribas, but most banks, the studies show that they access half the capital for the same projects than men, buyers. So I think we need to work on all these domains at this time to overcome the obstacles.
Muriel, thank you. So image and balance and capital, right? So 3 very simple, clear things for us to address. And Sophia, you know, already an introduction really there into the capital piece, but let's just also look at, you're in finance. Tell us how you look at technology roles, because sometimes we think about cybersecurity or we might think in a very narrow lens. Talk to us a little bit about what those roles really look like, and that helps with the image and the appeal.
Yeah. Hello to everyone. First of all, of course, we're a bank. In fact, a bank is a tech company. And I would say that in a tech, we encompass not only IT, but also IT, cybersecurity, data, AI, a lot of different jobs that we could put under the umbrella of tech. Within BNP Paribas, we are roughly 190,000 people. We have already 50,000 people who are working in the tech part. We are 1/3 of women. We think that it's not enough, so we are working on that, on what you say, Muriel, the education. So we have a very strong, I would say, development path with our NGO. We have 9 NGO, of which Simplon, that we are supporting because we think that education is key, and we have ambassadors of the company who are going in the schools to make them understand what tech is. And we have also the training part internally and for people that we are recruiting, because we think that we do not have only engineers who could join the tech sector. We could have many different competences. So the idea is to just be aware that you can bring different competence and be trained for the tech sector. So this is very important for us, and this is why we are working on that internally. And of course, externally, if I take the finance part, we are also very engaged for women, entrepreneurship as a whole, not only in tech. And we are speaking about allowing 3 billion euros of financing, and also engage ourselves when we are taking capital in companies, that we are sure that we are at least each year being at 15% of women entrepreneurship being part of our equity development.
Excellent, thank you. So such a kind of interesting summary of how you look at it, the progress that you're making. And both of you so far have talked about skills, but also the ability to recognize skills that might be transferable from being a baker, for example, to a data scientist. So how we do more around skills is critical, and a really good segue into Thomas, whose book, I, Human, which you can see over on our lab here, which focuses a little bit, Thomas, on tech advances and how the increasing use of AI is having an effect on the labour market, right? Having an effect on the workforce. For good, depending on what you read, for bad, depending on what you read. You're the expert, though, so you tell us your perspective about this increased demand for human skills or power skills, as we talked about them earlier.
Yes, and so other than all the factors that have just been listed, which I agree are critical to increase inclusivity and gender diversity, there is one very important yet overlooked factor, which is talent. The best gender diversity intervention is to focus on talent, not on gender. This is very, very clear. The evidence, if you look at the science, indicates that, first of all, when it comes to hard skills, women outnumber men in university and outperform men in university today, including in many STEM subjects, which, by the way, are no longer a requirement if you want to lead tech teams. Secondly, when it comes to soft skills, especially the soft skills that actually enable people to lead effectively, things like empathy, humility, self-awareness, integrity, emotional intelligence. If you select leaders on the basis of these skills in a gender-blind way, you won't just end up with more women in leadership roles, including in tech, but more women than men in leadership roles. And thirdly, when it comes to the negative or counterproductive skills that derail leaders, dark side traits like Machiavellianism, narcissism, psychopathy, men over-index in these traits. And they're often chosen for leadership roles because they display these traits. So actually focusing on talent would massively improve things for women in tech and other industries and improve the quality of our leaders, which is better for everybody, including men, of course. Men benefit when they have better leaders, and a world in which we appoint leaders on talent will lead to more women leaders and better leaders. So it's better for everybody.
Cool, thank you. There's a good chuckle in the audience when we call out what's wrong with leadership, right? And one of the reasons for getting more women into leadership. But let's just kind of go back and focus on the tech piece specifically here. Muriel, from our own experience, we have part of our business is our Experis IT resourcing business. So we have hands-on experience of what kind of talent is available, what kind of talent our clients need, and where we need to really build talent, because enough of it does not exist. But even what we see is that where women are represented in technology roles, however broadly we look at technology, is that they can have a tendency to be more represented in junior roles than they are in leadership roles. So how do we progress more women into the sector, but more women up through leadership and right to the C-suite? And some of the work that you've done that's referred to as the Penico Index too, has begun to start to address that. Just tell us a little bit about that index in case people are not aware of it, but also about the progress that we're beginning to see when we call for transparency and we look at the data.
First, I think it's very important to say first that there is no freedom without economic independence. It's basic, but it's the basis of feminism. And tech can provide good compensation. But then, including in the tech, we don't have equal pay, we don't have equal opportunity of careers. So what we did in France, in the French government, when I was a minister, is we created with the employers, unions, and a lot of networks of women in business. We created this index, and in the law in France now, you have an obligation to have equal pay for equal job, but also equal opportunity of careers, equal opportunity of raise of salary. Because very often, for the same jobs, it's more or less okay, but you stay on the bottom. So it's very important to do that. Since 3 years is an application, it's progressing. And also we measure the percentage of women in the top 10 compensation. And there's another law that measure how many women in the executive committee of companies by Marie-Pierre Rixin. And it's very important to measure to make progress. And at the Global Summit of Women, we have presented that, and many countries are looking at doing that. So I think at least in the sector, in all countries, there could be an effort with some academics to measure that. It's quite easy to do, but you have to do it in a proper way, because this will oblige to progress. Because I'm, have a few years than most of you, and this discussion is not new, but there is progress, but does not go enough quickly. So it's very important everywhere to push for measurement and then commitment.
Thanks. Measurement and commitment and a reporting on progress, right? Not just pledges, but driving progress. So thanks for that, Muriel. Sophia, in your leadership role and with your vast experience in HR, just tell us a little bit about where culture comes in to this too, in terms of, Thomas talked about representation and clarity of women in leadership positions, how that begins to change behaviors and competencies, but take that a little bit further in terms of culture.
Well, I would say that the culture comes also from the tone of the top. It's very important to be aligned all around the organization. And if the top management is not pushing, nothing would come. So I think that we need a very, very strong commitment from our managers. This is what we have, and I really thank our CEO because he's really going for that. And then it leads the thing. And then you have to measure, as Muriel said. So both are very important. The culture of being leaders and pushing for diversity as a whole. Of course, women, but not only women. We need more diversity in terms of generations, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of disability, in terms of LGBT. So this is all the 5 pillars that we are fighting for, and being sure that, of course, they are represented at all levels. So we have some objectives, KPIs. We look at those KPIs every 6 months to be sure that we will reach those 40% of women at the top executive and 50% of women in our talents, because we need also to feed our talent. So this is in our DNA. And coming to what Muriel says in terms of Index Pénicaud, I just wanted to say to you, Muriel, that we were inspired by what we are doing in France, and we created what we call the Equality Index, which is quite the same index as the Pénicaud one, but globally for our 65 countries and for all our people, all our businesses. This is what we do since 3 years, and we are really now looking at where we stand in terms of equality index by countries and by businesses. This is our culture. We have to make objectives and to measure. If we do not that, we could not reach what we want to do.
So I'll do a little plug as well, as Muriel raises her eyebrows at Manpower Group, and I'll say we are committed. We also have a commitment to get to 50% women in leadership by 2025. It's hard, right? Because we make progress and then you step back, you have churn. So the point about the pipeline, Sophia, I agree. And so how we look at our pipeline from our 60-something% at an entry level, and how we look through our organization is critical for all of our leaders within the organization. So, which is a good link to Thomas. Just you talked about the your book about leadership. You have your book about AI. You mentioned a little bit earlier around the whole kind of ethical piece around AI. We'll talk a little bit about trust with everybody, but if you start us off about how we need to be so conscious of trust in an AI age.
We need to build trust, which requires educating people and going beyond some of the counterproductive, sensationalist discussions that occur on AI. One of the things that we need to understand is that, first of all, AI is a human invention that has particular potential to debias systems and organizations, which is the opposite of what is covered on AI in a typical discussion. Humans are biased by design. No amount of unconscious bias training will help us erase categorical, sociological, or demographic information about people. Humans are very good at learning things, but very bad at unlearning things. Whereas AI is very, very good at both, at unlearning things as well. Now, when we look at examples, case studies of AI breaking bad or algorithms gone rogue because a tech company programs a chatbot to predict who gets promoted in a firm, and that technology then recommends a surplus of middle-aged white male engineers, and they stop using the chatbot, the bias does not go away. The bias is not in the AI, is in the system. But here we have a tool that can actually help us expose bias and could easily be retweaked, not to be programmed to repeat what worked in the past, which mostly doesn't work, but what should work. But if you do that and you give people not what they want but what they need, they'll be horrified, right? We could all retrain our, Spotify, Netflix, Tinder, Amazon, Twitter recommendation engines to give us something that makes us more open-minded and not something that turns us into a more exaggerated version of ourselves. It would lead to a mass exodus from those platforms onto something that we want. And so, it's not so much about trust, it's about how much we love our biases and we're territorial of our biases, and then we don't want the technology to come and work as a mirror. So much of the complaints about AI are things we don't like to see in ourselves, but we attribute to machines. This is the fundamental bias.
So we don't like it when the data tells us our gut is wrong and that we
Correct.
should trust the data. Right. So good points on trust. I think, going to come around and either, pick on a couple of people in the audience shortly. So have your questions ready. That was like a doom noise, right? To just warn you of a Q&A.
That was AI.
That was AI, overarching. But just kind of moving on from kind of trust and bias, let's focus on something positive. The technology industry has been disproportionately impacted probably around negative media, negative cases on all kinds of level. We're seeing an increasing number of layoffs within the tech industry in recent months. an overhiring, I would say, through COVID times actually. But it's a very impacted industry. We hear a lot about burnout too. So now we've got to know one another for quite a few minutes now. Let's just talk about well-being and how we are nurturing our own well-being. Let's just move along our panel. Muriel, please start us off. How are you doing in nurturing your own well-being?
You mean personally?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So when I was 25, I was already hardworking, very committed, and on the way without knowing of burnout. And I was at this time I was the head of it's called Mission Locale in France. It's a NGO that helps all young people without jobs in Metz. And the president, who was a guy that had 25 activities, were worse than me. One day told me, "You will have a great future. You have a great talent. You blah 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 blah." Blah. But one advice I can give you, only one advice: take half a day a week doing nothing. All the big decisions I've made in my life came from this so-called empty half a day. I wouldn't say I've been able to do it all the time, especially when I was a minister. It would be a lie, but I do it very frequently. I can tell you a lot of the innovation I've launched in Dassault Systèmes as a minister in Danone come from this day, because your brain, your heart has to reconciliate in something. It cannot be taken on weekends for over your children or your family. So I think it's very difficult to do it. But first, it balances yourself, but it makes you more creative too.
Half a day.
Half a day a week. At least 1 month, 1 a month. That you can do it. Start by that, and you will see the benefit. But don't take the list of things you were late to do that. No thing.
So from my side, I don't know if the mic doesn't work. Sorry. It's work? Yeah, it works. Well, I'm married and I have 3 daughters, so I always think that we need to work on 3 pillars. Be there with your family, be there with your friends, and be there for your job. Why? Because every time there could be one of the pillar is a bit weak, and at least 2 feet, you will stand on 2 feet at least. So for me, it's very important to be balanced on both 3, which means that you have to take time for your job, for your friends, and for your family. And as I'm HR, I need to take care of myself to be sure to take care for the other ones. So I practice also some yoga parts, and yoga is very good to take some perspective on that.
Thank you, Sophia. That's such an important point, the balance, right? The balance of how you're going to feel confident in your job and loved and be loved at home, right? So, Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any mysterious secrets or, hidden formula to well-being.
We know you do. None that you're going to touch on this morning.
Do I? No, I think, exercise, eat well, drink in moderation. I actually love my Aura ring. I'm a data enthusiast, so I monitor everything. My deep sleep, my REM sleep, what time I go to bed, what time I wake up, There's a relatively weak correlation between...
For French people, it's a bit difficult.
I know, but here they are hearing from an outsider. And it doesn't matter how many hours you're in bed. You have to go to bed at the right time with the right mindset, and then get sufficient REM, deep sleep time, and monitor. Learn to listen to your body, which is counterintuitive, but after 4 years of this, I'm at a point that I can wake up and predict my exact sleep score, which is a weirdly satisfying for no other reason that I think my self-awareness has extended to my physiology, since psychologically I have none.
So we're going to get into the secrets now,
yes,
aren't we?
Exactly.
So let's stop and maybe take this to the audience. But I think what we take away from this is a little bit connected to the earlier points, that leaders have got to demonstrate this kind of looking after their own well-being too, to be authentic leaders in the workplace, to look after the teams, to look after teams too. So all lovely insights into the personal lives of our guests this morning. Thank you. Is there a question in the audience? And if there is, will you raise your hand? We'll bring you a mic, and you can tell us who you're addressing the question to. There was a really fast hand at the back. I can't see your name.
Still can't see your name.
I definitely can't see your name.
No mic. There are two here and one here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I had a general question for everyone. So women in tech are often told that they need to choose between either building a family and having children or adopting and pursuing leadership roles in tech. What advice would you give for women who want to pursue both?
I would say, first, don't let other people dictate what is good for you. If you want to do both, we know it's difficult because the start of the career and the start of baby is usually at the same age. But ask the men why it's not the same question for them. They want children or not? They want a balanced life? So I think more and more young men want also to invest and choose only men that understand that.
Hello, I'm Zineb. I come from Morocco, and I've launched an NGO for women mentoring. And you talked about the 3 challenges at the beginning. I think there are also internal challenges that we have, and that are related to our conditionnement and also our education. And I think not only in the Maghreb but also in Europe and also in the United States. And that's why I think that the representation and role models, access to role models, and also to mentoring, to have somebody, you talked about how top management has to be representative also by the
Zinnia,
diversity.
remember it's a question.
Yes, please. So what do you think about the role of mentoring also in this kind of challenges, internal challenges that people may have?
First, I agree with you. There is the external glass ceiling, there is the internal glass ceiling. It's a conditioning of education. And in most countries in the world, 90% of women think they are not legitimate, they are not good enough, and they feel insecure to get a promotion. So it's a big topic. And when I was the CHRO of Danone, we launched the Eve movement with thousands of women, and to learn to dare to be leaders. But the 2 keys, and we have experimented that since years and years, are mentoring and networking. So everything like mentoring and networking are key to break this internal glass ceiling. You cannot do it alone in your kitchen. It doesn't work. So go for that. You are right.
And I just could add something. I don't know if, I would just add something, which is, of course, you could have also double glass ceiling when you're a woman and coming also from a different country. And why I'm saying that, because in our company, we are really supporting employee network for networking. So we have employee network for women, for ethnicity, for whatever. And we're also making mentoring. And why I'm saying that, we have a special mentoring program with an external mentor who works on that for women from other culture, and we see that they are speaking up more and more about their education, that not let them be legitimate, and we work on that, and we see a lot of progress. And I think that this is key. Mentoring is key for those women and also for the people, the mentor, to understand what is going on.
Zinnia, thank you for the question, because that's made us just even talk about network, the power of network, and the power of mentoring too. And then there's a question, a green question, and then a last question here before we wrap. So thank you.
Green is the color of hope, so I hope that this will change here, like the situation of women. So I'm Nada, I'm an engineer. I've been working in tech, fintech, finance. And at 35, I got married because I was hustling and working from 9 till 10, 11, 1 a.m. when I was investment banking. And the thing is, we have bias. We have physiological bias because we're born as women. And at 35, we want to have children. And when we have children, we have fertility issues. We have children who can be maybe ill or sick. And the thing I have the best husband ever. He's very helpful. But the thing is, someone has to stop his work and stay with a sick child. You have to take some fertility things, and you cannot be stressed because of work or other things. And this is being more and more common with women, because women are no longer having children at 23 or 25. They're having children at 35, 40 plus. And I wanted to see with you, are your companies doing anything to reintegrate women who are 35, who are mid seniority or high seniority level, who have taken a career break, and then they want to reintegrate the workforce. And for me, it's practically impossible, because I've been hustling, doing networking. But you have been at home for the past 5 years. Yes, I had a child.
All right. I think this is another great question. I don't know if we'll do it justice. Sophia, I'm just going to turn to you for this one with your kind of HR perspective particularly.
Well, I think, as I said before, every woman at a certain point of the career has some issues, either young children, but we need to understand them, to speak up, to understand what kind of issue they have, to be sure that we adapt the way we accompany them. So sometimes, when I was young, I decided not to go for investment banking because I wanted to be balanced and to continue to work full time, and I chose something else. So the idea is to be sure that we are coping on a relatively nice way, on the level of engagement that we know it could be different when you are 30, 35, 45 or 50. But then women have to speak and to let know where they stand. Sometimes they are hiding that, and they think that people could just guess. No, we can't guess. We just have to have a very open discussion to understand where women stand and what we could do for accompany them.
I was talking with a headhunter. I told her I want something more balanced. I want to work in a fintech startup. And she told me, listen, your child, you only see him in the morning, you have to drop him to school, but you have to put in your mind that before 9, 10 p.m., you're not back home. So this is why we women, we don't have access to like jobs and interesting jobs, ambitious jobs in tech startups. We already have bias at engineering school. And we're not as lucky to have like very good high network to have jobs. But then
maybe something on that. First, I understand fully what you say, and it's a huge dilemma in life. It's very difficult to live that. But I think more and more companies realize that to attract people, to retain people, they need to offer a diversity of situation. Some company now, more the big company than the startup, are paying for some time off to go for a mission, to a purpose. What is the best purpose? That to take care of your sick child. So, and they understand to do that to retain people, but also because they understand that the people who have other experience in life, social, climate, art, whatever it is, are larger, bigger, more innovative, have more soft skills, as Thomas said. So I think probably, if I have advice, there are some companies, look at the companies that do this kind of policy and go there. Some are not ready, but some are.
I think this is a perfect place to end. Thank you for all of your questions. I know there would have been many more. I think what we're concluding is that everything that we've heard about good leadership and everything that we've heard about skills, soft skills and technical skills, the organizations that can demonstrate how they show their values will attract the best talent. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Have a great rest of the day at Viva. Thank you. Thank you to our guests.